Well, Sky security and defence analyst Michael Clarke is back with me in the studio. Michael, we're going to have a look at what's happening in Zaporizhia in just a moment. But first of all, I want to ask you about President Biden's assessment of potential nuclear Armageddon. What is your assessment of that risk? We were hearing from Diana there that many of the nuclear warheads haven't been taken out of storage, as far as we know.
No, that's correct, Samantha. I mean, Diana's exactly right. If any of the nuclear warheads were on the move anywhere in Russia, Western intelligence would know about it, I promise you. And they're being watched like a hawk. And so...
that's reassuring.
Yes. While that is the case, the Kremlin is trying to signal. It's trying to keep the nuclear debate going in the West. And it's succeeding. And so Belgorod, one of the submarines, rather like this, isn't the Belgorod, but the similar class, it's the K-329, the Belgorod. It's a huge thing, 30,000 tons. It left its base in Sverdlovsk in the White Sea a few days ago. It's now up in the Barents Sea, right up in the Arctic. And this carries this enormous Poseidon nuclear torpedo designed to create radioactive tidal waves that will sweep across land masses.
But it's above water.
Exactly, yes. And it's on the surface. And so they're showing everyone they've got it. Now, the Belgorod only came into the Russian Navy. It was only commissioned about 3 months ago in July. So this is a sort of testing voyage that it's on. It will probably test something. It may test one of its torpedoes or one of its unarmed missiles. But the fact that the Russians are making it very clear that this submarine is now on the move is just a way of keeping the tension high and keeping us talking about tactical nuclear weapons, because there is obviously a political game going on in the Kremlin now, a lot of infighting in the Kremlin. If they are going for some sort of talks, if they want the West to lean on Kiev to go in for talks, then keeping the nuclear issue high on the agenda is a way of encouraging the West to lean on Kiev.
Yeah, and having us talk about photographs like this. Talk to us about what's happening in Zaporizhia.
Yeah, Zaporizhia. I mean, this is where there is a nuclear issue. The Zaporizhia nuclear plant, of course, it's different from Zaporizhia, the city. They're about 50 kilometres apart, 32, 33 miles. The Russians control the Zaporizhia power plant. They now claim, because of the annexation declared last week, they now claim that, of course, is theirs, which it isn't. And there have been missile strikes, as we've reported, in Zaporizhia city. There are a series of reports that those missile strikes have originated from missiles that the Russians have fired from inside the plant. Those are unconfirmed reports at the moment, but it would make a certain amount of military sense, because we've always thought that the Russians are trying to goad the Ukrainians into attacking the plant so that they can claim that the plant is not safe and that, therefore, anything that happens at the plant is Ukraine's fault. We'll see what happens there. But Zaporizhia is now in the crosshairs of Russian civilian targeting, because we think that the Ukrainians may even be opening or about to open another military front somewhere in the Zaporizhia region and put the Russians under even more pressure.
Interesting. So we mustn't take our eye off what's happening there. Talk to us as well about what is happening in the northeast, where we saw some stunning Ukrainian gains there. Is it slowing down? Yes. I mean, the front has slowed down a little bit because the Ukrainians, I think, are repositioning themselves. Key area there is Kamena. North of that is Svatove, and north of that Troyska, which is a line that goes right up to the Russian border. And that's the main communication line from the Russian side of the border right down to their forces in the south. And the Ukrainians have got those communication lines now within artillery range. This war is very much an artillery war, and the range of artillery is really critical. And so the Ukrainians have now got the Russians really bothered by the lack of communications. And they are pushing on Crimea, and they will probably, we'll see what happens in the next week to 10 days, they'll probably push them a bit further out, and then I'm guessing they'll swing southwards. Meanwhile, the Russians are taking a few villages near Bakhmut, and that's mainly the Wagner group. It's not Russia's main forces. It's their private military company, their mercenaries. It's not doing them a whole lot of good, because however far west they go from Bakhmut, they're going to be outflanked by Ukrainian moves further north. So that front is less mobile than it was, but there's an awful lot of artillery going on. Interesting. So we could see some more of those yellow hash lines. I suspect we'll see another quite big push in the coming days, but perhaps not this week. And what is happening in Kherson? Yeah, Kherson is where things are moving very quickly. Russian forces have begun to fall right back, and they've lost a lot of territory in the north of the area. And the Russians have been trying to create a defensive line between Snehurivka and Milove.
And that line is not holding very well. They've pulled back. They've not pulled back in very good order, it seems. They've abandoned a lot of stuff. And they're trying to hold that line, and the Ukrainians are pushing them on that line. The reason that that line is important is because Novokakhovka, which is the really important hydroelectric plant here, controls the water supply to Crimea, plus the road system further on towards Kherson. Novokakhovka is now under real threat from a Russian point of view. And if the Ukrainians are breaking through that line, which they probably are beginning to do, the Russians don't seem as if they can hold it, then Novokakhovka is in severe danger for the Russians. And Kherson is also under pressure. There'll be a much tougher fight for Kherson because the Russians will not give that up. That's the most significant city they've taken. They really will fight around it very hard, but that's a separate battle. Novokakhovka is where we're thinking at the moment.